The Earth is adrift in a mysterious and limitless cosmos to which mankind is as ignorant as it is insignificant. Those who have left their humanity far behind whisper of the great old ones. Gods, titans and monsters that comprise and control the very fabric of our malignant reality. In their wake there is only insanity and death. This is why the stories of the rare few to stand against them go untold.
Lovecraft's Untold Stories is a game that was created by Blended Games, which is located somewhere in Petersburg, Russia, and published through Badland Games. I tried researching Iqra Entertainment, and to this day I have no clue who they are, but seeing as though they are mentioned when this game boots up, obviously must mean they had a hand in giving us this game. Like many other indie titles, the difference between its initial premiere and contrast with the end product that we have exhibits some obvious changes. For example, the character's icon went from looking somewhat pleasant and bright to looking like you just experienced the year 2020. Originally, how much ammo and money you have was shown by these counters that depicted the amount. Now in the final product, the counters were taken away and the player has infinite ammo, so there's no need to worry about running out. How the map looks at the top of the screen also looks different along with other noticeable cosmetic changes, but overall the main gameplay mechanic still looks the same though. This game was released on June 28, 2018 with other consoles and devices coming out later on. I'm going to be reviewing the PlayStation 4 version, so let's get into it. Within the pixelated art style, Untold Stories looks very nice to look at. The game provides a nice creepy atmosphere and tone, from its grotesque monsters and various types of enemies you run into, and even the different environments you move through have a nice level of detail to them. Examples can be found within the raindrops falling to the ground, the bullets dropping whenever you get your hand on that Tommy gun, and even certain enemies that burst and move around in this fast and unsettling motion. This game's interpretation of the iconic cosmic gods is something to behold as well. The graphic and disturbing ways you see your main character die in some instances is very interesting to say the least. The enemies that you will encounter was done very well also. Everything from your cold worshippers with guns and axes to your disturbing looking monsters that look like something that could very well come from Lovecraft's works. The various environments and stages implements what you would imagine from a horror game. Evil hospitals, graveyards, and other levels infused with ancient looking symbols and things that can seemingly go back to occult practices. But the most disturbing thing in this game, however, is actually the player's imagination and ability to picture what has been told to you through this game's various moments of exposition via either letters or descriptions of items. Now, within playing this game, there were a few hiccups every now and then. When there are too many enemies coming at you on the screen, the frame rate could chug just a bit, but it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't happen that often, but it's noticeable when it does.
Gods, titans and monsters that comprise and control the very fabric of our malignant reality.
Untold Stories is essentially about these cast of characters taking down godlike beings inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft's mythos. If you don't know, H.P. is a famous writer whose works in horror coined the terminology cosmic horror. This is simply the works that incorporate horror with other elements that would normally be found within science fiction. In this case, he'll be dealing with extraterrestrials and other dimensional deities that lies dormant, influencing and controlling the aspects of humanity and civilizations from the shadows. Lovecraft created these interesting creatures across various writings, novels, and stories whose backgrounds for the most part are still a mystery, which is one of the things that intrigues artists and many other people to this day. A popular example would be the iconic Cthulhu, but of all the monsters, this one is actually the least horrifying if you can believe it. These creatures are gods, as some would say, whose descriptions and abilities is something that HP has masterfully sparked many people's imagination with. You see, Lovecraft capitalized on how human beings can be afraid of things that are unknown to them. Things that are incomprehensible and out of their control. The tool that HP used was the emotional state of being known as madness.
Like this.
A loss of sanity that, according to his works, is something that people will experience being exposed to these monsters. This is something that actually ties into the game mechanics. More on that later, but first. Lovecraft's Untold Stories is a single-player game that behaves like a semi-roguelike pixelated version of a survival horror game with twin-stick shooter controls. And now that I think about it in a nutshell, it's kinda what it is. In this game, you initially play as a detective who investigates strange phenomena going on. Quickly, you discover that obviously things are not what you would call normal. You are equipped with a shotgun with infinite ammo, so all you have to worry about is your reload time. You also have the ability to roll over obstacles like traps, spikes, and other objects while journeying through your different levels. And lastly, you have the ability to do a melee attack that drains your stamina meter, which is located here on the right side of your screen. As you move about, you come across items that are needed to preserve your life, which is indicated by this bar here. Items such as bandages for when your enemy attacks you and leaves you bleeding, antidotes for when you are poisoned, arms for when you die and need a second chance, medkits to heal yourself, and many more items. You can quickly access these items by assigning them to quick triggers, which is indicated at the bottom of the screen, or go to your inventory to utilize them. You come across items by inspecting and interacting with everything in a room. It's best that you leave no rock unturned, so to speak, and sweep every room you come across so you can gain and store more helpful items. I mean, come on, this is survival horror 1-on-1, and just like in other survival horror games, you actually have to pay attention to item management. Unfortunately, the player doesn't have a whole lot of space to hold on to items, so it's up to the individual to determine what to hold on to and what to drop. But please be very careful, because even though some of these items may not seem much now, in conjunction with some of the things you may come across as far as people and side quests, I'll get to that in a moment, these items can have surprise uses. The more you explore the map, every so often the player will come across a merchant that looks like an Ash G's avatar, or creepy people in robes that summon doors. Both will sell you things in exchange for either money or an amount of info that you get from finding items. You also come across huge containers that which you can store your items from when you return to what I like to call the hub area. More on that in a little bit. So far, the player has to keep track of the character's stamina, health, and the last thing you gotta worry about is your character's sanity. Due to all of the questionable things your characters come in contact with, his grip on reality and self-health begins to bend and decrease a bit. There is only so much a person can see and be exposed to before it traumatizes them or have a negative effect on them. Whenever the player is losing their sanity, this purple goo will show up on your character's picture, and it can be seen all over your body if you open up the item menu. The more you lose your sanity, the more this goo will spread across your body. At first it'll start small, but over time it begin to spread and grow to the point where you'll see the screen kind of shake a little bit and you'll begin to hear your character's heartbeat. When this happens, you're on the verge of death, my friend. To get rid of it will require interacting with something uplifting, chocolate bars, or an item that can take it away from you. When you explore, you come across these objects that leads to the player choosing which option of how to respond to what the character is observing. Depending on your choice, interacting with these objects can either push you close to losing your mind, or it can provide a slim relief for whatever there is for you. Honestly, some of these objects just looks and sounds like you're just asking for your character to lose it. If it looks kinda creepy and you get the feeling that it's not gonna be helpful, go with your gut feeling and leave it alone. If you lose your sanity, you will commit suicide. Now, when each stage you find yourself in has somewhat of a main objective to complete, which is typically to kill the boss of that level and proceed to the next. But again, being patient enough to read and observe everything within the level is rewarded. Some of the rewards include discovering and unlocking other characters, which have their own playstyles, stories, levels, strengths, and weaknesses, or objects that may be very important to the overall plots of the game. A good example of the objects needed to maintain your sanity when inevitably squaring off against the old ones, which are the big baddies of the game. Knowledge is power, and the more you know of your enemy, the more you won't go off the deep end when you finally confront them. Most levels are just you, the monsters, and well, the merchants, but if you run into anybody else, more than likely you just found your introduction into your side quest. And as I said before, the other things to take note are the items in your inventory and some that you may come across. Case in point, when I wanted to gain entry into this laboratory, I first had to find and empty out this syringe, fill it with some other substance located somewhere else on the map, just to inject it into this corpse and bring it back to life so I can get a key. Another time I had to equip this mask looking thing that I usually would just come across and pay no mind to it. After equipping it, I was able to bypass this woman blocking the entrance, and those are just two examples. And again, the devil is within the details, so read and pay attention to the items and people. This game does not necessarily do a good job of spelling things out, nor making things convenient and finding out where to go, or what you have to do to unlock these hidden plots. This will require some critical thought, so without the hand-holding, it now falls upon the player to be responsible for just how much can be solved, revealed, or obtained. Happy exploring! Speaking of exploring, the player is given a map so they won't get lost. You can see a smaller version of it located at the central area on top of your screen, or you can open it up fully via your option to get a good look at your location and navigate as to where you would want to set your destination to. There are certain icons on the map that would be helpful to you, such as the question marks that show you what places that you will need to explore, and exclamation points that show you what items that you can interact with. To me, one of the most helpful abilities that is granted to the player is the ability to fast travel. With this, it can save you a whole lot of time instead of just walking back and forth through different places. I have another helpful tip for you. There is an item in this game that when you use it, it will reveal the map in its full entirety. Using this item will even reveal the hidden areas by having them colored in a pinkish light purple on your map. If you want to see how much of the level that you completed, just hit the pause button and it'll show you by percentages. Lastly, I want to talk about the hub area that I mentioned earlier. This is the place where the player will be taken at the end of each level, serving as an intermediate area between the next level and the level you came from. Here, you can look at the description of every item you come in contact with, stashing away items and materials for future endeavors such as redoing a level. Oh, and killing yourself. While I did talk about redoing a level, let me expound on that. You see, if you want to redo a level, the player will have to start a new game. The player will be treated to a screen where the player must choose the level he or she wants to play again. However, the drawback of doing this is the player will have to start without the items gained. It will literally be just a new game without your materials until you come across the hub area again. Here, all the materials that I hoped you stored in this box during your previous game will still be stored and accessed. So pretty much this container serves as a somewhat safe deposit box for your items, but more importantly a time capsule of sorts. That is why it is safe to stash away the items you don't want to lose before redoing the level or starting over with a different character you play as. You do not want to lose some of the items that you work hard to get, which is why it can be really infuriating at times when you down a level. You see, when you fail, you don't just go back to when you first entered in the room that you died in. Nope, that would be too forgiving. The player actually goes back to the beginning of the level without retaining any of the items or money gained during your previous run. Your progress gets a hard reset. You have to do it all over again. Sometimes the longer you play, the player will be caught in a predicament where they will enter a room with a miniature army of monsters and other things jumping you at the same time. So keep those useful items on your quick triggers, because when you go into a menu while still being under attack, this leaves you vulnerable. You will die in less than 3 seconds, so stay on your toes. The sound design and the quality of the sound effects was on point for the most part. The groan sounds coming from zombie-like creatures and the sounds of flesh reanimating from some of your enemies sounds disturbing and does a good job of keeping the player on the edge of their seat. The sound of things breaking is loud and clear for sure, and the sound of gunfire packs a huge punch. In some instances, hearing the borderline futuristic electronic sound from some of your enemies and the character you play as took some getting used to. During my playthrough of Untold Stories, I played with my headphones on, so every footstep, sound of thunder, raindrops, birds, and even the people popping was an experience I experienced in full detail. The music was something that you can expect from a game like this. Atmospheric for the tone that this game is aiming for, but nothing really too dynamic or anything that will stand out, seeing as though there are like 2 or 3 tracks that you will continuously hear on the loop throughout your playthrough. One is this slow piano ballad that seemingly plays in this endless loop, and another that plays when you're in an area surrounded by enemies. The music does the job for what Untold Stories is aiming for, which is a creepy, unsettling, and anxiety-inducing experience, which is all the purpose and reason for people to play certain games like this. The music was composed by Red Owl and Jay Kavinsky and can be purchased via Steam. Links to the OST will be provided in the description below as always. But with everything covered, I'm going to give H.P. Lovecraft Untold Stories an 8 out of 10. I had and am still having fun with this game, even though it can be difficult at times with the understanding of the fact that you can easily die if you're not careful enough. The visuals looks great, and through its gameplay mechanics, emphasizes to the player that your resources is something that you need to hold on to for dear life. This kind of makes completing the stage and obtaining more important items satisfying, something that an awesome survival horror game accomplishes and adheres to, giving the player a sense of urgency and uncertainty when the elements presented to the player is done right. Now, because this game seems to be somewhat under the radar, there is no guide of some sort to help you out unless you do a due diligence within your Google searches or to look for blog feeds to search for your answers. Now, besides this game, I am quite surprised at the many things dealing with H.P. Lovecraft that I've personally been exposed to recently. For example, there is an indie film with Nicolas Cage in it called Color Out of Space, which is created by the same people who did the film Mandy. It also has Nicolas Cage in it going berserk. This film is based off of H.P. Lovecraft's novel that bears the same name. After seeing this movie and then seeing this game iteration of the tale kinda brought a smile to my face. Seeing other similar representation of H.P. Lovecraft's works and even himself being brought to life in this game makes playing Untold Stories a huge callback, let alone a huge Easter egg to people who are familiar with his works. And since we are on the topic of H.P. Lovecraft, I would recommend checking out Lovecraft's Country, an HBO Max series that of course is based off of the 2016 Matthew Ruff novel that has the same name. So far, this series has been awesome. It's the perfect blend of H.P. Lovecraft horror with the terrors of a racist United States. But anyway, Untold Stories is now available for PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and Steam for $15, and is also available for Google Play and Apple iOS for $10. I would give this game a shot if you're into survival horror. Be safe out there. Peace, y'all.